Bullets stitched through his coat, horses crumpled beneath him, and yet George Washington kept riding. To his soldiers, he seemed unkillable, a leader the world could not remove from the saddle. That idea, that aura of invincibility, became a living legend that carried an army through fear and frost. Tonight, we follow the near misses, the myths, and the moments that built the unkillable George Washington. To understand why people thought Washington could not be killed, we have to meet him before he became the first president of the United States. George Washington was a Virginia planter and surveyor in the mid-18th century, when North America was a patchwork of British, French, and native nations competing for land, trade, and power. Washington was a British subject, and as a young officer in the Virginia militia, which was a part-time colonial force, he stepped onto a frontier that could end a life as easily as it made a name. The great conflict looming over his youth was the French and Indian War, which was the North American theater of the wider 7 Years' War. It began in the early 1750s and pitted British and colonial forces against the French and many native allies. The Ohio Country, a vast region around the forks of the Ohio River, where Pittsburgh stands today, became the crucible that tested Washington and began the legend of his survival. In late autumn of 1753, the governor of Virginia sent Washington, barely in his early 20s, across hundreds of miles of wilderness to deliver a message to the French, ordering them to leave the Ohio Country. The journey was perilous. After parleying at Fort Le Boeuf, he turned home through snow, swollen rivers, and deep woods. Near the Allegheny River, the water ran cold and choked with ice. Washington and his guide, Christopher Gist, tried to pull a makeshift raft across. The poles snapped, the raft spun, and Washington fell into the freezing river. He fought the current, clawed onto an island, and survived the night as ice formed around him. At dawn, the river had frozen enough to cross. It reads like a trial by water, the first brush with a death that failed to take him. A day or two earlier, a native guide had turned his musket on Washington from close range. The shot missed. Washington recorded the incident, an early hint of the pattern that would feed the unkillable idea. Misfire, near drown, try again. 2 years later, the pattern blazed into legend. In July of 1755, British General Edward Braddock led a column toward Fort Duquesne. In a ravine outside the fort, French and native warriors shattered the red-coated line. Amid the panic, Washington, serving as a volunteer aide, galloped along the smoke-filled road, carrying orders, rallying men, and hauling the wounded. When it was over, he wrote to his brother that he had found 4 bullet holes through his coat and had 2 horses shot out from beneath him, yet he suffered no wound. To soldiers and to enemies, it seemed uncanny. Years later, a native leader from the Ohio Country reportedly told Washington that he had aimed at him repeatedly during that battle and that he believed a great spirit had shielded the Virginian from harm. Historians debate the details of this meeting, but the story traveled far in early America, adding sacred weight to the sense that Washington could not be touched. Frontier taverns added their own embroidery. One folktale, often called the Hickory Brothers story, pictured 2 backwoods sharpshooters lining up Washington in their sights, only to have both rifles betray them at the trigger. There is no firm evidence for this yarn, and the Hickory name later echoed more famously around Andrew Jackson, but the tale shows how people wanted to explain the same thing. Aim at him, and fate refuses to cooperate. When the American Revolution erupted in 1775, the Continental Congress made Washington commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He faced an empire with a force of farmers and tradesmen, short on gunpowder and training. The unkillable aura began to serve a purpose beyond survival. It gave a nation in the making something to believe in. The winter of 1776 brought the test. After months of defeat around New York, Washington led a nighttime crossing of the ice-clogged Delaware River on Christmas night. Freezing spray soaked his men. Hail stung faces. They marched before dawn and struck at Trenton, taking the Hessian garrison by surprise. The weather that could have killed them became the cloak that carried them to victory. Washington, riding the storm instead of falling to it, turned retreat into revival. The legend grew, not only as invulnerability to bullets, but as a knack for surviving the elements and the odds. A week later, at Princeton, he gambled again. American troops faltered under British fire. Washington galloped between the lines, only a few dozen yards from the British, and rallied his men to advance. A volley flashed from the British side. Smoke rolled over him. One of his aides covered his face, expecting to see the general fall. When the air cleared, Washington was still in the saddle, calm and resolute, waving his hat. The troops surged forward. That moment for many became the picture of unkillable Washington. fire at him and he rides through the smoke. At Monmouth in New Jersey in 1778, under a scorching sun, he rode up and down the line to steady a battle that teetered on collapse. Musket balls snapped the air, cannon shot chewed the earth, and still, he seemed a fixed point in chaos. In New York, in Pennsylvania, across winters of hardship and summers of heat, he kept placing himself where morale could rise only if he stood visible. His survival became a tactic. If he would not fall, then perhaps the cause would not fail. There was another, quieter layer to seeming unkillable. In his early 20s, Washington had contracted smallpox on a trip to Barbados, lived through it, and carried the telltale scars and the immunity. During the Revolution, smallpox tore through armies and towns. Washington ordered a system of inoculation for the Continental Army, a process that exposed soldiers to a controlled dose to build protection. It was risky, but it saved lives and kept the army from unraveling. Here, the unkillable theme becomes policy. Having survived disease, he made survival the army's strategy. As the war ended in victory, the stories calcified into myth. The bullet holes in his coat at Braddock's defeat, the horses shot beneath him, the icy river that tried and failed to close over his head, the smoke of Princeton parting to reveal him untouched, the whispered native prophecy, the tavern yarn of the Hickory brothers. Some details are firmly documented. Some are folklore that reflects how people felt. All of them converge on the same truth. Washington's presence on a battlefield, or in a blizzard, or in a sick camp, convinced others that the cause could not be killed. The climax of this myth was never a single duel or a single miraculous escape. It was that winter chain from the Delaware to Princeton when the Revolution had almost slipped away. In those weeks, the notion that Washington could not be touched became the spine of a battered army. Men who had seen him ride into musket flares without harm believed their own luck might hold another day. That belief created momentum, and momentum became victories, and victories became a nation. Unkillable did not mean immortal. It meant that at crucial hours, the man who had most reason to fall remained standing, and his resilience spread like fire. The war ended, Washington resigned his command rather than hold on to power, and the new nation invited him to become its first president. He accepted, then stepped away after 2 terms, showing that the unkillable aura did not require a crown. It required restraint, survival, and service. Of course, George Washington was human. He suffered illnesses, dental pain, fatigue, and doubt. In December of 1799, he died at Mount Vernon after a rapid throat infection. Mortal, yes, yet the idea that he had been unkillable during the making of the United States did not fade with his passing. The Hickory brothers' tale remained a colorful yarn, echoing the belief that rifles and fate conspired to leave him unharmed. Why does this theme still matter? Because nations are built not just on laws and battles, but on stories that shape courage. Washington's unkillable image reassured a scared people that history might give them another chance tomorrow. It taught that leadership is partly about absorbing danger in public view. It reminds us that myth grows around real risks taken for real stakes, and that sometimes the line between luck, skill, and faith blurs in the smoke of a volley.